Time now for an in-depth look at the market news this afternoon, and for that I'm joined on the line by Mr. Daniel Yu, global strategist at Yuanta Securities. Mr. Yu, as always, thank you for making time today.
Thank you for having me always.
Well, stocks on Wall Street strongly higher on Monday with a bunch of M&A news and growing hope for a coronavirus vaccine. What's the story in the global markets?
Yes, as you said, U.S. market did quite strong move last night. If you look at the Dow Jones, it was up 1.2%. S&P was up 1.3%. The Nasdaq was up quite strongly by 1.9%. And small and mid-cap stocks, the Russell 2000 was up 2.7%. And volatility index also fell. Clearly, this was a good signal that the recovery for the equity market for U.S. was actually happening. The reason why such strong move occurred on Monday was because there were various signs of the M&A activities. If you look at the corporate side, NVIDIA announced that they'll be purchasing the chipmaker of ARM's holding from SoftBank for $50 billion US, while the ByteDance chose Oracle to be TikTok's U.S. technology partners. And also Gilead said that it will acquire Immunomedics for $21 billion to expand its cancer treatment. All these news for the growth sectors M&A is actually benefiting the overall market movement. It seems that this kind of positive move is affecting the futures market as well tonight. The futures indexes for the S&P 500 as well as the Nasdaq is up about somewhere between 0.4 to 0.6%. Clearly, the news for the resumption of AstraZeneca's trial for the COVID-19 vaccine also lifted the sentiment in general. If you look at the Nasdaq and the growth sectors, it did suffer in the last 2 weeks, falling by as much as 10% from peak to bottom. But with the recovery that we saw yesterday, it seems that the sentiment is coming back. We hear that the inflow to Nasdaq ETFs were quite positive and quite strong. So overall, the direction of the equity market seems to be quite sustainable with upward momentum in the growth stocks in the future.
Seems like a similar story here in Korea. Stocks higher today, too. Lots going on there. The U.S. gains plus data from China and the easing of social distancing here. What's happening in the Korean markets?
Yes, Kospi actually was very strong at the beginning, but slightly lost some steam. But nevertheless, it ended close with a 0.65% rising today. Overall, there's a lot of news coming up from the China side as well as the Korea side. If you look at China data, the retail trade unexpectedly grew by 0.5% year on year in August, compared with the market consensus of flat number or declining numbers. So clearly, the Chinese market and Chinese economy seems to be recovering quite smoothly. China's industrial production also showed 5.6% year-on-year growth rate on August, accelerating from the 4.8% growth a month earlier. Clearly, these indications are saying that the boosting measure by China is actually affecting positively for economic growth rate, as well as the domestic consumption in China. Obviously, Korea does benefit from these positive numbers coming from China, that the Korea's export numbers should be improving in the future. Also, the local investors are cheering up for the possibility of the COVID-19 induced restrictions to be removed in the future. That might have positive indications for the domestic consumption in Korea as well. All this is benefiting overall that the Korean equity market is actually reaching the 4 weeks highs, 1,400 points were kind of on the top side, but it has broken above 1,436 points today. So clearly, overall, the sentiment seems to be in a positive direction with the U.S. market moving higher. We think that this kind of sentiment can continue for further in the future.
Now, about the U.S. sanctions coming into effect on Huawei, that's as of September 15th, so tonight in Korea. What effect will that have on local chip makers and stocks?
Right. Starting September 15th, China's telecom giant Huawei, it is the symbol of the 5G power in China. Starting September 15 will be cut off from the essential supplies of semiconductors. Now, this will have some negative implication in terms of the smartphone makers of Huawei, also the 5G equipment side as well. Now, if these things happen, then it might be negative for Samsung Electronics or SK Hynix in the short term, because if you look at the sales number in terms of semiconductor shipment and semiconductor sales, Huawei is a big part of the sales. For Samsung, it's about 10%, about 9% of the semiconductor sales, and also for the SK Hynix, it's over 10% of the sales. So if this kind of restriction happens, then it's definitely negative news in the short term. However, if you look into the longer term basis, it is positive news for the Korean makers, because competition will be less, and also the market share-wise, in a longer-term basis, Korea will continue to increase its market share in terms of semiconductor business. Also, for the semiconductor equipment or the foundry business, also Korea can gain its market share in the future. So overall, we think that it is positive news for Korea in the longer term, but maybe in the short term, it might cause some volatility because of the losses in sales for the Huawei as the buyer of demand side. Overall, I think that IT sectors, there's a lot of the changes are happening, but all in all, we think that this is a positive news at this point in time, where the technology sector is going through a lot of M&As, a lot of the changes, and eventually the overall demand will pick up quite significantly over the next 1 to 2 years. So if that's the case, then we should be looking at positively on IT-focused countries such as Taiwan and Korea.
Got it. All right, Mr. Yu, thanks so much for sharing your insights today. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much.